Good morning. It is good to be here, and I've appreciated the music this morning in particular, so thank you. And the warm hospitality and greetings that I've received between services and at the earlier service, and now it's our turn. I bring you greetings from Bright Divinity School, which is just down the road on the TCU campus. We have a few students from this congregation, who are Aya being one of them, and Tanner, who should be one of them. Cameron. Bright Divinity School is your seminary. We're related to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, but we have over 20 denominations represented at Bright. As I say, we're the progressive seminary in the Southwest, and we serve lots of Unitarian students throughout the years. Right now we have a number of students who are in New Orleans having way too much fun at your General Assembly, I think. But I congratulate you for the election of your new president, Susan Frederick Gray. The students are thrilled about her presence and her gifts of leadership, and I hope that this turns into a great season for the UUA as you continue your journey. So thanks again for inviting me. If you have any questions about Bright Divinity School, I'm glad to answer them, or we'll send you to the right person, but it is good to be here. I don't know about you, but in the midst of the world around me, I'm finding myself particularly weary these days. It could be the pace of what I thought would be a nice, easy summer. However, we're writing 2 grants, leading focus groups, going to the Disciples General Assembly. I just returned from my own annual conference in the Rocky Mountains. There's just way too much going on. But it's not that kind of weariness that is really getting into the depths of my soul. Rather, it's the weariness of watching the news day in and day out, and realizing that every time I hear something new in the world that has occurred, it feels like a little piece of my soul has been touched deeply, and I grow more tired. Every time I hear about gun violence or about a young African American man who's at the wrong end of a gun at the hands of police, I find myself more weary. Or in the last few weeks, hearing about the healthcare debate and realizing that that conversation has an impact on everyone I know at some level. I worry about what will happen to my mom, who lives in a nursing home and depends upon Medicaid, or my sister, who has a chronic mental illness and depends upon Medicare and Medicaid. I worry about the number of people who don't have access to the resources they need to get the help they need in order to strive, in order to survive and thrive in the world. Those whose access to health care will be extremely limited if bills go through. And I find myself growing more weary. Or when I think about the legal protections that seem to be taken away almost overnight and yet not so. The rights of LGBTQIA, the rights of people who come to the United States who may not have the United States as their first language place of origin, the number of immigrants who get shut out of places where they might come to thrive and survive. I find myself growing weary. And it shows up every day. Not just the news, but my weariness. When I go to visit my mother, which I try to do every night when I'm home, lately she's been saying, "You look really tired," and I say, "Thank you." I feel really tired, but she says, mothers know these things, even at 89, and even when sometimes she's not in the right place, or at least the place that society thinks she ought to be. She knows there's something deeper. And then she almost always comments on the whitening of my hair. There is a weariness that I experience not just in myself, but in the people around me, my colleagues, students, people in churches. A weariness and a wondering about what will happen next. So in those moments of deep weariness, I have some rituals and patterns and habits of turning to things like reading Mary Oliver, who is one of the sanest women I know. If you haven't read Mary Oliver, do so. She reminds me to listen to the world around me, not the world created by cars and moving machines and cell phones, but the world of nature. He reminds me about what it means to live a life, not just that's valued, but that's worthy of living. Or I read Wendell Berry, who reminds me about the depth of the connection between human existence and the earth. And even in my weariness and my wariness, as I think about the environmental world around me, Wendell Berry helps to kind of keep me a little bit grounded. Sometimes I look for people who write on issues of hope, because I know that therein I might find something that will give me a little bit of relief. Howard Thurman is one of those persons. Howard Thurman, writing in the era when racism was rampant. Not that it's changed all that much, really. But being a man of prophecy and vision, and a man of deep faith and abiding hope, he produced a little volume called Meditations of the Heart, and in there's a little selection called Keep Alive the Dream in the Heart. Let me share a little piece of that with you. As long as someone has a dream in their heart, they cannot lose the significance of living. The dream in the heart is the outlet. It is one with the living water welling up from the very springs of being, nourishing and sustaining all of life. Where there is no dream, life becomes a swamp, a dreary, dead place. And deep within the person's heart, the heart begins to rot. The dream is the quiet persistence that in the heart that enables someone to ride out the storms of their churning experiences. It is the exciting whisper moving through the aisles of their spirit, answering the monotony of limitless days of dull routine. It is the ever-recurring melody in the midst of the broken harmony and harsh discords of human conflict. It is the touch of significance that highlights the ordinary experience, the common event. The dream is no outward thing. It does not take its rise from the environment in which one moves or functions. It lives in the inward parts. It is deep within, where the issues of life and death are ultimately determined. Keep alive the dream. For as long as someone has a dream in their heart, that one cannot lose the significance of living. In the midst of my weariness, I sometimes have a hard time remembering that dream that lives way down deep. Remembering that hope that is nurtured and sustained in the context of community, in the outreach of care, in the compassion of loving hands. I sometimes forget what that dream is like. And then I sometimes turn to a practice. Many years ago, when I was a young teacher doing administration and realizing that there were more things at the end of the day on my desk than at the beginning of the day, I found myself a little bit overstressed and overwhelmed. So I did what every good, smart person would do. I went to see a massage therapist. This was in Boulder, Colorado. And she said to me one day when I went in particularly stressed, and she said, well, your shoulders are up around your ears. That might be one problem. And as she was helping me relax a bit, she said, your problem is you don't know how to breathe. I said, what do you mean I don't know how to? I'm a smart person. I know how to breathe. She said, well, take a breath. So I invite you to take a breath. She said, where does your breath come from? And I said, well, it comes from out there right inside. And she said, yes, it comes right through your head, doesn't it? She said, for you, that's not such a good thing because your head is already busy and full. And you can't take in the kind of breath that helps you stay grounded. So she said, I want you to imagine that you're standing on the ground. And in my Old Testament way, I think about Moses taking his shoes off when he was standing in a sacred space and his soul was exposed. And stand with your feet connected to the ground and take a breath through your feet up into your being. Take a breath through your feet up into your being. And realize that it feels different than trying to come through your head down into your being. So I find now that when I'm weary and stressed, or I have one of those meetings that I wish I didn't have and that it's way too long and it's never ending, I try to get in touch with the ground. Even if I'm thousands of feet up in the air. And I try to breathe from the bottom up because I do believe that there's something grounding in that breath that is different than what I do in my head. I do a lot of things in my head. But it's when I get in touch with the spirit that comes from the ground up. And I take a breath. That I recapture something about the hope that I want to cling to. The hope that gives me a vision for a world that is different than the one we live in. We live in a world where people are divided, where you are either right or wrong, left or right, where people see you as an either-or person. Either you like me or you don't. Either you agree with me or you don't. You're on my side or you're not. You're a person of color or you're not. Whiteness being a color, yes? So, in a world of either or, the gift of being grounded is that we can be both and. We can both think and work and see issues around us to work on, and we can be grounded and take a breath. And take a breath of hope and of love that meets despair and anger and fear in new ways. We can take a breath and say, here I am being in the midst of community, in the midst of people who care. Here I am, and I also think about things that are really important. What I want you to invite you to think about today is, how is it that you do the both and? How do you remain grounded in the hope? The hope of a world that is different than the one we live in now. A world where perhaps there is less divisiveness and conflict, not where we all agree, because that would not necessarily be a better place, but a world where difference is so rich that we want to know it, that we want to explore it, that we want to come to understand it in new ways. A world where violence is not the answer when we feel hurt or exploited. A world where guns perhaps are not even a part of the culture around us in ways that kill people's soul and spirits and lives. A world where we see one another in all of the fullness of hope and love and peace. We take a breath. And even as we take a breath, we know that there is work yet to do, and we are called to do that work. Pick one issue. I don't care what the issue is. Think about where the passion for your hope gets most challenged. Is it around racism? Is it around healthcare? Is it around mental health issues? Is it around immigration? Is it around LGBTQ? Not just awareness and acceptance, but fullness? Where is your passion? And how do you keep doing the work? But at the same time, remember to take a breath. Breathe in deeply, because it is in that breath that we find our grounding for hope that allows us to do the work that needs to be done so that we can go back and breathe once again. I want a world different, not just in the future, but now. And the only way I know to make that difference is by staying grounded myself and doing the work at the same time and returning to breathe and nurture that dream and doing more work. It is a much less wearisome way to live in the world. Find your hope. Take a deep breath of it. Let it live in your being and bubble up, so that your existence is not mere existence and survival, but so that it shines into the world for others to see. And keep doing the work. But take a breath and keep doing the work. May it be that way for all of us who call ourselves faithful people in whatever tradition we find ourselves. Thanks be. Amen.